From Unity Church of Christianity in Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational Christian church providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress with the Reverend Howard Caesar.
So we are all creative beings, and we all are creating in various ways, and there are many things that have been created. And to give you a little perspective on variation of creation, the Pythagorean theorem, if you don't know, is 24 words. The Lord's Prayer is 66 words. The Ten Commandments is 179 words. The Gettysburg Address is 286 words. The Declaration of Independence is 1,300 words. The United States government regulations on the sale of cabbage is 26,911 words. But we all have the gift of creativity, and not just some, all of us do. And actually, I'd like to share with you the very first 10 words of the Bible. The first book of the Bible being Genesis, the first 10 words you should know, which is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, we interpret a lot of things metaphysically here at times, and one of the things you need to know is there is a metaphysical interpretation of heaven and earth. And the heavens really represent the unseen dimension, the field of infinite possibilities out of which God's good comes. That's the heavens, that unseen realm. You can't see love, but you can feel its effects. You can't see an idea, but you can basically experience its application once that idea comes into manifest form of some sort. And so there is the realm of the formless, the unseen, and that is what we refer to as the heavenly realms. And then earth, of course, represents the physical dimension in which the ideas take on form, in which the unseen from the heavens comes into the earth form in the realm of the seen. And so inside of you and me is heaven and earth, okay? We are made up of heaven and earth. So there is an unseen dimension to all of us, which is the Spirit of the living God. When we lay down this physical body, there is an unseen dimension that moves on, okay? So you and I have a heaven living inside of the earth of us, which is our physical body, okay? So you are heaven and earth going on, walking around this planet, heaven and earth, okay? And our purpose in life is, to some extent, create some heaven on earth, to have that unseen dimension of us that is divine, to be brought forth and expressed through the earth of us, okay? And that's what we were to be about. As Jesus taught through the Lord's Prayer, one portion of it at least, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, as it is in the within of you, in the temple of your being. And so, in the beginning, God created, as it states in the Bible, and has never stopped creating, of course. And God continues to create through you and me, to the degree that we open ourselves to being a vessel, a channel through which the divine is moving. And all of us have different degrees of opening to that divine, and that's part of our unfoldment, really. And I happen to believe that basically there is always a solution and an answer to every problem that a person could face. Any dilemma that we could face in life, there is always at that moment a solution and an answer. We may not get to it, we may not be clear enough to embrace it, but it's always there. At the point at which there's a problem, there is a solution and an answer. And expanding that a bit beyond an individual's lives, there is for the world at any moment, just as an individual has an answer and a solution, worldly problems have an immediate answer and solution. But the world, of course, is slow to get there in many instances because there are many different consciousnesses at work that it has to filter down through. But the truth is, there is the possibility in every moment and right now for a greater world to exist. A greater world exists right now in this moment in the infinite quantum field of all possibilities. You have to understand that. We just haven't got there. We haven't evolved there. We haven't unfolded there, but it exists. It's here and now. And that's part of our process. And so there is also available then to all of us in this very moment a greater life. There is something more that we're being called to that is to be moving through us. You know, God says to us that we're basically to create, and to create anew, to create different. Not necessarily the same old thing over and over, not the same pattern necessarily, but to have new visions, new ideas, and new pictures, and a new perspective of who we are and who we can be in the world, and the contribution that we can make that moves us forward toward a more expansive life, and therefore being part of a more expansive world. That's the role we play. And Jesus was, of course, all about that, moving us forward in our lives toward newness of life. And, you know, he said, I come that you may have life, and that you may have it more abundantly. And so there's something more that we're being called to of that dimension of life. And he also said that you really can't put new wine in old wineskins, that essentially you can't put new ideas into small-mindedness, static-mindedness. The tendency to stay the same and hover in that sameness, you know. And he shared parables that were always about creating a kingdom consciousness, moving beyond our limited ways and stretching. And he made it clear also that we're all at different stages of our own development spiritually, that we're being asked and invited to be like new wineskins. Okay, old wineskins mean that they dry up and they crack and they can leak and they don't keep good wine, whereas new wines are flexible and they're soft, okay, and that's where new wine will go. And so we're to be like that. And Jesus talks about, you know, the parable of the sower, and it's his example of really sharing that there are varied states of consciousness, varied states of receptivity for the truth that wants to find its way into us individuals as a vessel, as a channel, as a being, that there are always seeds of truth and seeds of higher ideas wanting to filter through into us and through us to be given expression. But we're all at different stages, and some are like you know, the seeds that fell on the wayside where birds simply came and ate them. They didn't have a chance, just hit the surface, never penetrated a person's consciousness, those seeds of truth. And then there are those that fell on stony places where there was some soil, but not a depth of soil, and just a little bit heat of the sun, and it fried them up. And because you didn't have depth, you didn't take those seeds of truth deep enough inside you, they too fell away very quickly. And then there are those that some fell in thorns, you know, and among thorns, and the thorns grew up and then choked those seeds. And those seeds of truth basically are ones that, you know, we maybe embraced and we wanted to be with, but then our old doubts and our old fears and our old issues came in and smothered us and took over again. And we weren't able to stay with the focus on the seeds of truth. And then finally, some seeds fall on good ground, and they brought forth good fruit, and some 100-fold. And so again, that's the consciousness that truly is the good soil. It's our minds, really, and what's going on in our mind, and how receptive our mind is, and the level of readiness that we have within our mind. And so God is sprinkling seeds of truth to us all the time. And it's the degree of receptivity that we have, and the degree of readiness that we have. As I say, our minds are like the soil, and different minds are of different composition, different quality, different development, different readiness, if you will. And so the metaphor or analogy to our lives is that there are always going to be for each individual, different responses to truths. And every person has their own history, every person has their own conditioning, their own childhood, their own experience with parents and teachers and what have you. There are so many factors that contribute to where each individual is in their progression. And that's what makes us all different. We have different experiences that we've had in life and different issues that we're being healed of and moving beyond. And so that's why, again, we should never judge another because really we don't know what has gone on in another person's life. And we all respond differently to truth ideas, and we're all at different levels of readiness, if you will. And we all have and respond differently to divine ideas that may be coming forth as seeds of truth, or to respond differently to the dreams, to the visions, to the hopes, to the desires, to the goals that find their way into us. Some of them, they are just swept away like a bird coming and taking that dream, that idea, and it doesn't have a chance. Other people have a sense of the ability for God to co-create with you, that anything is possible, and they grab hold of that seed and they take it deeper inside and they don't let go of that seed, and by golly, they create different kinds of realities in their life. And all of that is a dimension of what's going on. But there is a part of us that loves to create, and because our Creator is a creator, all right? And so the Creator is in us. And so we have the Creator within us. We are co-creators with God, and we love to create. And some people like to paint, and some people like to do sculpturing. Some people do photography. Some people build buildings, or do woodworking, or are writers, or play music and do compositions, or whatever. I like to landscape. Don't laugh. No, that's my canvas. As I've shared before, you know, in the different homes that we have moved toward, I get down and I sketch out the landscape, where the patio is going to be, if we're going to have a pool, where the flower beds are and all that, and then that becomes my canvas. And I enjoy each spring planting everything and watching it grow, and it's a canvas that's always moving and beautifying as things take shape. That's very fulfilling for me. And so we, I think, are most being like God when we are creating. And so another way that it's speaking, we speak of this is we're talking about creative energies that are moving through us, and we're managing them, we're directing them, we're focusing those energies. And it's much like when we were a child and we had a magnifying glass, you know, and we'd take the magnifying glass and let the sun come through the magnifying glass, and we might burn a hole in a piece of paper, or start a little fire in some dry leaves or something. But we'd see how when you focused the light, how powerful it was and what it could do. And in the same way with us, we need to become the magnifying glass in which we are really channeling the light of God through us in a particular way. And as we hold the focus, and as we stay true to the focus, and as we allow ourselves to have depth of that idea or that truth in us, then the energies shift and change, and we become a different person, and our life takes on a new reality. And as Jesus said, have faith that with God all things are possible. All things are possible. I don't believe everyone lives that they really believe that, you know, with God all things are possible. And so we know that there's always creation going on, even inside of us, that are you know, constantly new cells are being created as we sit here in our physical beings. We know that if we get really upset with something, we can actually get physically ill, sick in our stomach, where our judgment faculty is. And we know that if somebody embarrasses us, that we can turn red. So even our physical body, we can't hide the fact that a thought carries creativity into the earth of our being. And so when we focus our thoughts in one direction on something, we are basically bringing that from the unformed into form, the unseen into the seen. And that is a God job that we don't do alone. We can't do that on our own. It's in alignment. You know, we can look at history, and history tells us that whenever there was a need that has arisen for humanity, humanity was looking for a solution. And so someone has come along with an idea, an invention, a vaccine, a vision, that provided a way beyond, something better came about. And so could have been music like Beethoven, could be Shakespeare, could be Edison. They all used the same faculties of creative thought, and they allowed themselves to be in tune with a creative flow in some regard, and to be a channel for ideas to be birthed and brought into expression. And so there is one creative mind that we all draw upon, and these individuals and others like them drew upon that one mind, that one intelligence. And just as we say, we don't always get what we want in life, because we get what we focus on and what we believe. And if we think something is impossible, then that's what we'll get are indications that it's not possible for us. And then if we insist that a thing can and will be done, then all of a sudden doors open and things come together. As long as we hold fast, we have to sometimes be patient, but the universe will go to work to help us, because that's the nature of the universe. It wants to help us. If whatever it is that we're holding to is good and harms no one, it's amazing. There's a man named Elmer Gates, Dr. Elmer Gates, and no relation to Bill Gates. This guy lived actually in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and he was a great scientist. He was a genius inventor. He invented some 200 useful patents, many inventions, was less publicized than others for one reason or another. But you could look him up and read about him. He was a very fascinating guy. He had a very systematic way about connecting with the universe and the divine, because he believed that you could tune in, and that the nature of the universe was to help you move forward, that there were ideas just everywhere if you would just open to them. And so he had something called a personal communication room that he created, and it was soundproof, and it would shut out all the outside light. And it had a small table in there, and it had a pad and a pencil there, and where he sat, you could control the lights and turn them down, and he would seek to draw upon the creative forces of the divine in that room. And he'd sit down, shut off the lights, and he'd concentrate on all the known factors, what he knew about a particular invention he was working on. Everything that he knew, he would just really absorb, and then from there he would shift his mental position into a total openness of ideas that would begin to flash into his awareness in connection with unknown factors of the invention. And so it'd be like you and me having a problem or a situation, and we'd sit down, and it's a form of meditation, but it's very creative in knowing that solutions exist in that moment. And so, okay, you allow yourself to look at, here's what the problem is, here's the ins and outs of it, here's everything you know about it, okay, now, and now you open up to the divine bringing forth, because you know it's coming from a knowing that the divine is wanting to help you, and there are solutions, and there are answers. And creating that space allows it to come in an amazing way. There's another one of my heroes is George Washington Carver. And I love to go back and read about him and what he has done. And I never get tired of that, because he was such a spiritual man. And if you know anything about him, is he got up every morning and early, and he would talk with God. There wasn't a day that went by that he did not talk with God first thing in the day. And he was, when it was realized that the single crop of the South, which was cotton, was wearing out the soil, he was the one that encouraged the farmers to grow crops in rotation. And then he also had them grow the sweet potato and the peanut, because they were crops that he discovered grew in greatest abundance in that area. And so all the farmers listened to him, and they began to produce sweet potatoes and peanuts, and pretty soon they produced more than the market could absorb. And so now he had another problem. And so, today we would have, the government would provide aid for the farmers, but the aid that George Washington Carver knew existed was the divine. And so he went talking to God a bit more, and he was the one that came up with 300, mind you, 300 new uses for the peanut, 150 new uses for the sweet potato. How does one do that? How does one do that? And, you know, he told us how to do that. Actually, Thomas Edison knew of this guy and offered him an immense salary to come work with him, Thomas Edison. But George Washington Carver declined. But Carver, he taught himself to play the piano, and actually a visitor came one time and asked him, you know, if it was true that his playing of the piano helped to defray his costs and expenses through college. And the answer that Mr. Carver gave was, there is literally, his quote, I love this quote, there is literally nothing that I ever wanted to do that I asked the blessed Creator to help me to do that I have not been able to accomplish. How would you like to be able to say that? Huh? Yeah. And then the visitor remarked at what a marvel that very statement was. And Mr. Carver responded by saying, not at all. No big deal. You know, it's all very simple if one knows how to talk with the Creator. So wouldn't you like to learn how to talk to the Creator like that? And it just starts with starting to talk to the Creator. Just starts there. Okay, but it starts also knowing, and he had such a knowingness that there wasn't anything that the Creator couldn't help him do. And with that knowing, there was no blocks, there was no walls, there wasn't anything. You know, his filters were wide, they were gone. They're just, oh. And then there was one other I want to mention, which is Walter Russell. And there's a little book called The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. It tells a lot about his life. Very fascinating guy, very spiritual too. He was a writer. He did illustrations for books and magazines. He also played the piano, the organ, other instruments, taught music for a while, conducted a 3-piece orchestra, had many of his own compositions. Then he also was into painting and portrait painting, including the children of President Theodore Roosevelt he did. He designed and built $20 million worth of buildings in the city of New York. And this was at a time in which it would be equivalent to billions of dollars of buildings today, okay? And he did some sculpturing as well, created a monument of Mark Twain. So he made his living in 5 arts, okay? Music, literature, architecture, painting, sculpturing, and all with little more than an education of simply the first few grades, the lower grades. And how did he do that? He too spoke of, there isn't anything God can't do. This universe is teeming with ideas. You just need to open to it. You have to know that's possible for you. You see, and what I would like for us to know is whatever it is that you may face in your individual life, whether it has to do with prosperity or healing or guidance or relationships or whatever it might be, just realize that the same God that was able, in talking to George Washington Carver and others, was able to share, here's 300 ideas, by the way, for the sweet potato. Here's 150 for the peanut, whatever. That same God is there to know exactly what is your next move. The ideas are there. We call them divine ideas. And they're just waiting to be jumped on and lived and given expression. You know, every life has within it inescapable turning points, opportunities, epiphanies, breakthroughs, passages, all of these things. And all of them are potentially, you know, very powerful creative times that serve as springboards into our next level of living and being, the more. I want you to have more abundant, as Jesus said. And so Deepak Chopra talks about this, and he says this in one of his books. I love this. He says, to you, a thought is an image or idea floating through your mind. But to the universe, and here we mean, he says, the universal intelligence that permeates the swarm of galaxies, black holes, interstellar dust, that universe, to that universe, a thought is a step in evolution, okay? It is a creative act. To truly live at the center of the one reality, meaning God, evolution must become the primary interest to you. To realize, he's saying, that every thought is evolutionary, potentially. Every thought is a creative act, a step in evolution, and that it should be of primary interest to you, he's saying. And Deepak goes on to say, he actually reminds us that we operate in two nervous systems. One is involuntary, one is voluntary, and the involuntary obviously has our functions working. We don't have to think about it. If a person goes into a coma, their heartbeat and blood pressure and other functions still go on and coordinate to some extent. But the other nervous system is the voluntary, because it relates to our will, and it carries out our desires, and our desires to do and to be and to have and whatever it might be. And without it, without that, our life would run exactly as the person in the coma. And some people are living in one. We're walking around in a coma because they really haven't taken hold of the creative capacities that they've been given. And so Deepak, he says, at this moment, you are seamlessly flowing with the cosmos, and there's no difference between you breathing and the breathing of the rainforest, or between your bloodstream and the world's rivers. You understand? You're just a smaller version of a whole planet, in a sense. And so there's intelligence to access. And the times in your life when you experienced the most gain and growth and evolution were times when there was a readiness in you. There was a readiness to move forward. There was a readiness to pay attention to what was going on, a readiness to follow your inner guidance, really seek it out, be interested in it, be expanded, be set free, being tired of being tired. You were willing, there's a readiness to be a new person. And when you're truly ready to move forward, the whole universe will breathe itself through you, support you, and show you how. And so my favorite verse is the Apostle Paul, where he says, "The creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God." The creation, the whole creation waits with eager longing for you and I to be ready to move and progress and evolve more into being the sons of God that we have been created to be. So are you ready? Yes. Ready to pull the trigger? Yes. Ready to say yes? Yes. Okay, go for it. God bless you. Be a light in the world.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. At Unity, we believe that God's presence of love and goodness is everywhere, and that life is meant to be good. You can find out more about Unity and our teachings at unityhouston.org.
Are you currently church shopping, looking for that right church for you or your family? Perhaps you've been looking and been turned off by organized religion. It happens. Let me suggest you try Unity Church. We are a positive, practical, progressive approach to Christianity. Many who have found us have said, "I didn't know there was a church that taught what I always believed." Let's be honest, people shop for clothes, good restaurants, and the right church that feeds them spiritually. If you're seeking a spiritual truth beyond tradition, try Unity Church. Come join us.